Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today we're going to talk about 8 board games to try out if you are a fan of Carcassonne. If you're not a fan of Carcassonne, you should probably play Carcassonne, or you can keep watching this video anyway. Carcassonne is an older game. It's been out for quite some time, gone through a variety of implementations, been through a variety of publishers, has had a ton of big boxes. This game has been around for a long time. I played this game well before I ever got into the big box world of designer, the big world of designer board games. I've been playing this since, I don't know, like 2000 maybe, 2001, 2002, I don't know. It's been a long time. I've been playing this for a long time. Carcassonne, to what it does, is a tile-laying game. The general idea of the game is you're going to be constructing out a shared landscape, and in that shared landscape you're building castles and roads and churches and chapels and gardens, and depends what expansions you have, there are so many ways to add to what you're building, but it's just satisfying finding that perfect little square piece, that tile that fits in between the other tiles to create the beautiful, wonderful landscape that is Carcassonne. That's the general idea of it. It's not cooperative, you are competitive, you are scoring points for completed castles, you are placing meeples onto roads and castles, and occasionally having your meeples join other meeples as those castles blend together, and then you either share points, which nobody's happy with, or someone is the victor, and at least one person's happy, and the other person is less happy, so I don't know which one of those things is better. But either way, that's the general idea of this fun tile-laying game that has been incredibly successful, and which, if you're watching this video, maybe you've played? Maybe, I guess inherently, just as a matter of fact, you have maybe played Carcassonne. That is a statement of fact, regardless of whether you're watching this video or not. So, this video. 8 games to check out if you like Carcassonne. This is an ongoing series I've been doing around a bunch of, I would say, arguably more popular games. From Wingspan to Catan to Ticket to Ride, taking popular games and seeing what might be a good level up for you. A good way to move on to other games that share similarities, mechanics that if you liked this one, if you found this at your local Target, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, or your friend gifted you a copy, or if you're a hardcore gamer and you only like Twilight Imperium and you've never played Carcassonne, if you want to see a bunch of other games that share mechanics with this one, that I kind of go through an order of ascending order of complexity, well, that's this video for you. And so we're going to start off with the one that I think is arguably the most accessible from this list, which is going to be Cascadia. Cascadia is a delightful game. This is all stored in the Landmarks box right now, which is an expansion, but I don't recommend the expansion yet. Start with the base game, regular Cascadia, not Landmarks. Don't be confused by that. Get that one later if you like Cascadia. But Cascadia is a game that's going to lean into that tile-laying mechanism that you've seen in Carcassonne, although the first twist, and one of the reasons why it's the most accessible, is it's all on your own individual landscape. In Cascadia, you are building out your own landscape. And there's other things going on. It's not just tile laying. You're gathering these tiles that will go into a landscape. You're trying to connect the terrains. You have that satisfaction. You won't have the frustration of having someone get in your way or steal your things or take your castle, because it's all your own area. You are drafting tiles from a common pool, so there is that area for someone to take something that you are hoping for, but it's much less in your face or aggressive the way Carcassonne can be fairly cutthroat as you play it, especially at 2 players. Cascadia will give you that tile-laying reward, and then it builds in other point-scoring mechanisms. You're going to have a bunch of cards that are going to give you 5 different ways to score points in the game, and those vary game to game because the cards are all different. There's going to be animals, bears, and foxes, and all these animals are scoring differently each game depending on the cards you play, so it gives you a high degree of variety. It gives you that tile-laying satisfaction that Carcassonne gives you, but it does so on your own individual shared landscape. I think this is likely the friendliest one on the table that we have here. From there we move to one that's also going to be your own domain, but I think it's a little harder. It's a little more challenging to make this one work, and that one is Trailblazers. Trailblazers is delightful. You're going to be drafting cards every single round. There's a strong solo mode in this game too, by the way. It's worth mentioning. In fact, Cascadia also has an excellent solo mode. If you haven't experimented with solo games until now, these are both good options for trying them out and seeing what a solo game can bring to your table as far as the joy and satisfaction of facing and conquering a particular puzzle can do for you. But going to the regular competitive mode, you're going to be drafting cards in this, and these cards have pathways on them. You see, you're going to have your campsites, different types of campsites for hiking, kayaking, and biking. And you're going to have various pathways that go onto these campsites, that go around the campsites as you lay down these cards in different ways, with the goal to create these loops that come back to your campsite. You've created a hiking loop, and now you score points for said hiking loop. It's going to give you a bunch of variety of goals. You have other things to vie for, but the real challenge is every card has tons of just interswirling, interweaving pathways, and trying to lead them all together in a way that not just creates a hiking loop, but also sets up your kayaking loop, and also sets up your biking loop in the same time while you try to juggle the building of all of this. Is just a lot of work, but it can be very rewarding when you do so. That's going to be Trailblazers. Fun, fast, easy to play, great solo mode as well, and just gives you some of those things you'll like about Carcassonne, that I really like about Carcassonne. arguably the one that is most similar on this list to Carcassonne, I have to assume it's the most similar one, is going to be land versus sea. This to me feels like someone said, hey, I want to make Carcassonne, but I want to do it differently. And Land vs. Sea certainly does it differently. This game comes with a 2-player mode, a 3-player mode that adds a new way to play, and a 4-player mode which adds a new way to play. Basically, the game's not a 2 to 4 player game, it's a 2 to 4 player game with each mode being its own separate way of engaging within the shared landscape. In the game, you primarily have land versus sea. You are laying tiles down in a shared landscape. It's going to have that cutthroat aspect, but it's more about land is constantly trying to encircle sea, and sea is constantly trying to encircle land as the 2 primary players. The other player modes are going to add other ways to score points or to be an arbitrary player pushing points in the other direction while trying to score your own, so there are complexities being added here. But the basic 2-player mode is going to feel most reminiscent to Carcassonne. Again, the other modes as well, to a degree. But as you're doing so, you're creating the shared landscape. You're going to have that brutal, cutthroat feeling of cutting in on someone's terrain the same way you did in Carcassonne, but arguably a drop more in your face. I think Carcassonne could be played peacefully by those who want it, and I think Land vs. Sea, the versus is in the title, and the versus is there for a reason. This isn't the game where you can peacefully do your own thing. For me to do my thing, I have to encircle you, and for you to do your thing, you have to encircle me, which makes it feel like it's just a bit more edge to that thing you like about Carcassonne. Highly recommend Land vs. Sea. If you are a Carcassonne fan, this one is going to be the most similar to Carcassonne that I definitely recommend checking out. Coming at number 4, one that I don't have on the table over here, but also strong similarities to Carcassonne. Again, if you like Carcassonne, I very much think it's similar, is going to be Isle of Skye. Isle of Skye is a fantastic game. I've had it in my collection for years. It's one that's going to be... You're going to be building out a little landscape very similar to Carcassonne. You're going to be matching up terrain types. You're going to be matching up pathways. You're going to be trying to get, your little bottles of beer connected to your city, to your castle. You're going to be trying to get the various symbols. You're going to have scoring mechanisms that change up every single round. So effectively, there's a bunch of scoring mechanisms in play, but then every round you score some of them, not all. So in round 1, you're scoring the A and B, and then you're scoring B and C, and then you're going A, D, and C, or whatever it is. You're mixing and matching the various scoring combinations. So even though there are 4 things to be mindful of, not every round across 6 rounds of play do you score for those things. That's part of the interesting puzzle of it. So yes, you're building out a landscape, but there's reasons to build things out. You're also building out your own individual landscape, but that's not where the puzzle of it ends. Rather, the puzzle is that every round you're going to have tiles, and you set the bid price on those tiles. Secretly behind their screens, all players decide what these tiles will cost, and then set them up to the public. The more you price your tiles, the more money you get if someone buys it. But also, the more someone won't potentially buy it, the more expensive it is. And so there's an interesting balance of trying to ensure that if you are stuck with a tile, it's because you wanted that tile and it's a good thing to be stuck with it. Versus if somebody buys that tile, they bought it at a price point where you're like, at least I got that much money out of it. This pricing mechanism is, to me, the thing that makes Isle of Skye stand out. The thing that makes Isle of Skye the most rewarding is the sense of trying to figure out what's the right pricing to be able to take advantage of somebody else's good deal while making sure that I'm happy with my pool no matter how it plays out. So that's going to be an interesting challenge, interesting puzzle. Isle of Skye. Lots of expansions too in case you want to go ahead and add to the experience. Coming up next, we have Santa Maria. Santa Maria starts adding other elements over here. I think until now we've been really focusing very heavily on that tile laying with some extra scoring mechanisms thrown in, but Santa Maria is going to escalate that a bit. In fact, the next 4 all really start to escalate just what else is being added to the picture and how complicated these games get. Santa Maria is still fairly accessible, but in the game you're going to be building out your own individual tile grid as well, while trying to figure out how to score different areas of that grid to take advantage of the various symbols on them. So you're going to have different aspects of some of these games already, but you are heavily trying to build out your own individual grid while also dealing with the main board, while trying to gather ships to your pool, while trying to go up on certain tracks. The main core mechanism to me, though, is the way you build out different tiles that you're slowly but surely adding to central grid, and then the way you're going to be activating those tiles by utilizing dice placement every single round, as well as occasionally paying coins to be able to activate additional things. Santa Maria is an interesting game. It has an expansion as well with a bunch of modules you can go ahead and mix in, but it's going to give you that primary mechanism of, again, trying to build out an efficient scoring metric. It's not about connecting castles anymore. It's not about connecting landscapes. It's about what's on those tiles and how you're going to activate them, although there are roads. Trust me, there are still roads here. If we have tiles in these games, we do have roads attached to them. In fact, I think everything except for Cascadia in this game, I think has, in this list video of all these games, I think the only game that does not have roads on the tiles is going to be Cascadia. Everything else we made sure there's roads. There's pathways. You like connecting pathways. You've been playing Carcassonne after all. You know how to do it. Coming in at number 6, we have Clank Catacombs. Now this one starts to introduce an entirely new genre to the list. And again, we have roads or paths or some form of navigational aspect to it. Clank Catacombs, specifically, iterates upon the Clank genre. And the Clank genre is a deck building, not really a dungeon crawler game. It's a deck, but it's got elements of dungeon crawler, I guess. Clank in general is a game that's going to be primarily focused around the deck building, as players use a deck of cards and try to build out a better and better deck as they play through it in order to proceed further and further into a dungeon, grab the right treasure, and then escape out the dungeon before things get too messy and hard and you don't have an opportunity to get out. There's a dragon hunting you down, and as players do things, it makes the dragon more and more threatening, and so there's a timing mechanism of the other players are slowly trying to get what they need. You grab that first relic, you might not get that many points. You go too far into the dungeon, you might not get out, and so there's an interesting trade-off as far as how you pursue and engage with the system. And then Clank Catacombs took that concept and said, what if we make it so that you're building the dungeon as you go? We don't just have a set fixed board, we are now using tiles to create and construct the dungeon. If you like that navigational aspect, if you've enjoyed that about Carcassonne, but you want to see an entirely different genre, arguably the most different from any game on this list over here, I think Clank Catacombs is going to deliver that. It's going to introduce deck building, which is a big thing you may not have seen before, depending on who you are, what you played, but it's going to introduce deck building as a mechanic that really gives you a whole lot more to consider. It's going to introduce that kind of push your luck aspect of going to the dungeon. It goes a little bit of dungeon crawling involved in there as well. That game is arguably taking the tile laying mechanic and bringing it the furthest out from any other game that we're talking about, but if you do like the tile laying mechanic and if you do want to try other similar things, then I do think Clank Catacombs may well be a game worth trying. Which brings us to number 7, which is where we start moving back into the Euro domain. Euro games as a genre in general refer to a degree of action optimization. You have a set number of actions, you have a set thing, there's a little bit less luck going on. There can certainly be luck in there, but it's often around trying to just utilize actions to drive some form of victory points and often trading in for resources. You trade in a resource for that, you get in that, that gets you that, gets you that gets you that, you trade for that, you do this, and you get a point. That's the basic idea of a Euro game. And Raj of the Ganges over here brings you to it gives you an element of Carcassonne in it while being very focused on, again, dice placement to a degree, where you're going to be utilizing dice. Dice are going to be rolled every single round. You're going to have a pool of dice. You're using those to drive actions on the board. There's all these action spots, and different dice will have different effects depending on where you go and what you try to do. But while you have this puzzle going on the main board, while you're trying to build things out there, you are also heavily focusing on your sideboard, which, yes, has tiles, and those tiles have paths. Those are important criteria for this list video here. But you're going to be having your own little sideboard. You're putting, if I recall correctly, it might be 20 tiles, it might be 16. I'd have to look at the grid a bit. You know what, honestly, I can do that right now. I can look at the grid on this over here. Maybe it is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's 15. It's 3 by 5, not 4 by 5, not 4 by 4. It's 3 by 5. It's 15 tiles to be going onto your own personal grid, and what goes on those tiles, both in terms of the things on them, as well as the pathways of how they connect, will determine how well your personal little Carcassonne-like field is building out your better tableau. Certain tiles will help you as you sell things on the market, as you build things, as you get certain more buildings, which are buildings are going to be moving your build tokens along these buildings to get more rewards. You're trying to connect your pathways to the end of this little grid over here to get more scoring benefits. And you're doing that all while engaging in a degree of dice placement to move up the Nile slowly, but not the Nile, to move up the Ganja, to move up the Ganja River slowly but surely, getting increasing benefits as you place dice, take actions, build out your personal Carcassonne-like grid, and do all that in a delightful game. There's a little more going on here. Again, these are, to me, ranked in some degree of what I perceive as least complex to most complex. But yeah, Raj of the Ganges, I think delightful. I think it's still accessible. I think it's giving you a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of building upon some of the things you may have learnt in Santa Maria, if you choose to play that one. I think I personally like it more than Santa Maria, so if you want to skip Santa Maria and go directly to this one, I don't think you're making a bad decision. That's going to be Raj of the Ganges. And then finally, number 8, another one I don't have here on the table, but is Glen More. Specifically Glen More II. I think it's going to give you the cleaner, better, more streamlined version of the game with modules, tons and tons of modules to it, as well as an expansion as well for Glen More II, which is going to give you all those tiling, again, yes, with pathways over here, roads effectively, but in Glen More II, what you're basically doing is you're going to be building out a little central grid, and you're going to be drafting tiles every single round using an interesting mechanism where the person who's last always goes first. So if I want a certain tile on this little rondelle, I can grab it, but the further ahead I go, the more potential actions I'm giving everyone else. So it's always a trade-off of, do you take the first thing to maximize your number of actions, or do you take the best thing to maximize how you build out your grid? Always an interesting trade-off. But as you do so, you're gathering these tiles and you're putting them into your domain, and you activate all the tiles next to them. Meanwhile, you're moving all your little people around the grid as well to be able to most efficiently build out, to be able to most efficiently score as they go to the castles. You're managing an entire sideboard of various personalities and people that you're getting their various bonuses from, and that's before we even touched upon all the modules that are going on in the game, because there's an absolute ton of modules. I think the base game comes with 8 modules, and there's an expansion that adds even more content to the game, but it is going to build off that tile tile laying you learnt once upon a time in Carcassonne. It's going to have that aspect of you are trying to be mindful of how things connect, of what builds off of what features you get on different things. It doesn't have castles in a typical sense. It does have castles, you're not like connecting in the way you would in Carcassonne. You are trying to be mindful of your river path, of your central grid, of the way your other tiles activate each other. Every time you place a tile, you activate all adjacent tiles, which is a fascinating little mechanism. As you go through the game across the 4 rounds of play, you are consistently trying to be mindful of which tiles will pay off, which tiles are earning you things, which tiles are trading in things you've earned for points, which tiles are going to straight up give you points, which tiles are going to give you more anything in the game. There's so much to consider as you go through Glen More. It is arguably the heaviest one on the list. Not that heavy. It's still accessible, I think, but it's arguably the heaviest one we have on this list. And that's today's video. That's what we have over here. We have 8 games to try if you like Carcassonne. If you've enjoyed any of these games, it may well be worth trying any others of them. And if you specifically came here because of the title of the video, because you like Carcassonne and you want to know what's next, well, there's a whole host of games out there that might be right for you. These are just 8 that I think are a good starting point. In any case, until next time, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.